Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Jenny. I'm from Jenny Card Designs. Thank you so much for stopping by to spend some time with me here today. I have created this YouTube channel to share paper crafting, tutorials, and inspiration with all of you. If you are new to my channel, I would love to have you along my card making journey. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and click the little notification bell to be notified of future card making and inspiration videos just like this one. In today's video, we're going to be working with the Gina Designs Warm Winter Wishes Christmas Card Kit. We'll start off by quickly going through the contents of the card kit, and then we'll move along to 5 card projects with the card kit. So if you have this card kit, pull it out and craft along with me today. And if not, then grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea, sit back and relax and enjoy the video. Okay, let's jump in. So we've got this beautiful Winter Wishes card kit. Warm Winter Wishes card kit. It's jam-packed full of stuff. It comes inside of this convenient storage box, and we'll just pull out all of the contents and have a peek here. I like the content sheet inside of the package. I was able to download this ahead of time while I waited for my card kit and sketch out some card designs. So we've got the cardstock here. We've got 3 sheets of each in grass green, turquoise sea, and red velvet, along with 3 of each envelope in the same coordinating colors. Next up, we have the Snowfall stencil, and Gina Designs stencils are now etched in the bottom with the brand and the name of the stencil so that you don't lose track of that. And then the first stamp set we have here is Winter Hugs. So we've got some beautiful snowmen and some little elements to go along with your wreath builder and some nice sentiments to build upon each other. Next stamp set is the Christmas Silhouettes, and that's got some beautiful poinsettias, some birds, a branch, and a really lovely Christmas tree. We've got a third stamp set that's called the Folk Art Snowflakes, which has some beautiful, elegant snowflakes and some sentiments as well. And then also with this kit, you get 3 coordinating die sets to cut out all of the images for all 3 of the stamp sets, which is fabulous. And also, all of Gina Designs dies come on this magnetic storage board from Stampin' Storage, so it's nice and sturdy, so nothing will fall off and you won't lose it. And then you also get this really great tape runner. This is the dot adhesive from Gina Designs and ThermoWeb. So you get a whole roll of that, and that has 30 feet inside of it, which is really great. So that's all the contents for the kit, and now let's move into creating some card projects with these products. Okay, for the first card, we're going to do a sort of fun fold card design with a partial die cut. So we'll start off with the poinsettia from the stamp set, and I'll stick that into my Misti. And I'm using some red velvet ink, and I'm going to double stamp it just so that we get a nice dark impression. And then I'm going to bring in another, a darker color. I'll use a sponge dauber for that and just sort of dab the darker ink in the middle. The ink that I'm using is Cranberry Tart. It's a retired Gina Designs color, but you could use another darker color, maybe cherry red or something. The additional ink color will just give the flower a little bit more depth and dimension. I'll get that stamped, and then I'll clean the stamp off and remove that from the door of my Misti. And I'm making 2 of the same cards, so I'll be doing all of my steps twice for this design. So I'll get the die for this flower lined up, and I'll use a little bit of tape. If you notice on the side of my Gemini Junior there, I've got a bunch of bits and pieces of tape. I just leave them stuck to the side so I can grab them with ease whenever I need them. So I'll tape down the flower, and then I'm going to lay my card base on top of my cutting plate, and I'll get it lined up so that the top cutting plate is only halfway covering the flower or the die. So only part of this is going to cut. So wherever the second plate is, that's the only part that's going to cut. And I'll very carefully load this into my Gemini Junior, making sure that nothing shifts. And then once that comes out on the other side, you'll see just the bottom part of that flower is cut. So we didn't cut the whole thing out, just the bottom piece, just to create more interest to the front of the card. So I'll remove the pieces of tape, and then I'm going to pull in my craft knife, a ruler, a pencil, and a cutting mat. And I'll just measure up the side of my card panel, and I'll make a little mark so that we get a nice even measurement on both sides. And I'm just measuring my first panel to make sure that I mark the same line on the second panel so that the two cards are the same. So I'll make my little marks here. So the marks are just a guide for my craft knife as a starting point. I will line up my ruler to the dot that I've made to the partial cut on the flower. So I'll just run my blade gently down the side of my ruler. Light, even pressure and multiple passes is the best way to cut through cardstock. So once that's cut all the way through, I'm going to go to the other side and do the exact same thing. Right from the pencil mark to the cut line on the flower. And again, I'll just run my blade multiple times over. Since this is a fairly thick cardstock, it's 120 pounds. So I'll just run it over multiple times to make sure that we get a nice straight cut. And at this point in time, we should be able to remove the bottom piece. And then I'll go ahead and do the same thing to the other card. And then I'll pull in the stamp set to get some greetings from there. Nope, not greetings. Sorry, we're going to get some leaves from the stamp set. And I'm going to use Gina K Designs Christmas Pine ink. And I'll stamp a bunch of leaves beside my poinsettias. And then I'll pull in the greetings from the stamp set. So I've chosen the words Merry Christmas. So I'll just fold up these cards. I'll use my Teflon bone folder to crease the edges, and I'll get a nice sharp crease on them so I can put them in my Misti and be able to stamp the greeting with ease. So once that's all straightened out, I'll load up my greetings onto the door of the Misti. And then I'll use my anti-static powder bag to ensure that none of the embossing powder that I'm going to pour over top of this stamped image doesn't stick to where I don't want it. I've got some Gina K Designs embossing and watermark ink, and I'll ink up my greetings and stamp them down. And then I'll pull in some Brutus Monroe ultra fine embossing powder, and this is the gilded embossing powder, which is a nice gold shade. And I'll go ahead and sprinkle that over my stamped greeting, and I'll knock off any excess powder. I'll heat this with my heat tool until it's smooth and melted, and do that to both of my cards. And because my design is laid out on my card base, I did get a little bit of warping when embossing. So how I combat that is I run that back through my Gemini. I get all of my plates together and I slip the card in between the plates and run it through the Gemini Junior, and it just helps flatten it out some so that it is nice and straight. And I'll do that for both of my cards and then move on to the next step in this card project. So I've got a piece of the red velvet cardstock that came inside of the kit, and I've just cut them down to fit inside of my card base just to give us a nice layer of color in the background, and it gives the front of the card some interest. So I'll get those adhered inside, and then I've got some peel off stickers. Now I'll link to where I get these stickers. I buy these here in Canada. I know that there are a few places in the UK that may carry them, and some people have asked me if they can get them locally. And if you're in Canada, I will link to the store where I get them from. So I'll just use these little peel off gold stickers to tie in my sentiment to the rest of the card and give some interest to the design as well. Once I finish both of the cards, I'll flip them over and I will add my Handmade by Me sticker, which just has my email address and just to say that this card was made by me from Jenny Card Designs. So I'll put that on both of my cards. And then I decided that this needs just a little bit more something something. I wanted a little bit of like bling on the front of my card. So I've got some green and red gems in my stash, and I'll just kind of sprinkle them liberally across the front of my card, and then I'm going to call this card done. I paired these cards with a couple of the red velvet coordinating envelopes. Here is a close-up look at the finished card project. Moving on to project number 2. Okay, for this project we're going to create a little window, and I've got a piece of black cardstock and an oval die from my stash, and I'll just tape that down and run it through my Gemini, and I'll just get everything moved out of the way. And all I want for this card is that sort of frame, and I'll use the inside of that. Later on I'll bring that back in. So I've got my paper trimmer here. I'm cutting a piece of cardstock in half to create a top folding A2 size card base, and I will score that at 5.5, and this will measure 4.25 by 5.5. So I'm just sort of figuring out my placement. I'll set this all aside for now, and I've got a scrap of grass green cardstock that came in the kit and the Christmas tree stamp, and I'm going to load that up into my Misti. I'm going to heat emboss this. I'll use my anti-static powder bag on the cardstock to ensure that I don't get any stray embossing powder bits, and I'll go ahead and start inking up this stamp. I'm using Gina K Designs watermark and embossing ink for that, and I'll press it down, make sure I get a good even transfer of ink, and I've got a Recollection silver embossing powder that I'm sprinkling over the stamped image here, and I'll grab my heat tool and heat this until it's smooth and melted. Okay, once that's done here, I'll pull the die in for this tree, and I wasn't confident that I would get the die right over top of the image, so I've come this far. I want to make sure that I don't kind of mess it up. This is the first time that I've used this die, so I'm not sure how close it cuts to the edge. So what I've done is I've taken the insert of the oval that we cut out earlier, and I'll put the die on that and then run that through my Gemini just to make sort of like a little template so that I can see where the die is actually going to cut, and then I can put this piece over top of my tree and then slip the die in place over top, and I'll be confident that we have a nice clean cut on the tree. So I'll tape everything down to the cutting plate and then run that through my Gemini. And we'll just take this tree and move everything out of the way and get to completing the rest of this card. So I've got the snowfall stencil and Acrylic Expressions blender brush, and I'm just using whatever ink is left on my brush. I believe it's blue denim from the last project that I did. So I'm just using the residual ink and just creating a light snowfall in behind. So I pull the stencil off and I lay my little frame around and see that I still need a little bit more ink. So I have no trouble lining the stencil back up and adding just a little bit more ink towards the bottom. And then I'm happy with that, and I will go ahead and add some foam squares to the back of my frame, and by some I mean a very unhealthy, abnormal amount of foam squares as per my usual tradition. So I'm going to go ahead and spend a half an hour pulling off all of the release paper off the back of these foams and get it adhered down to my card base. Once I've got that adhered, I decided that I want to take the grass green Christmas tree and layer it behind that extra piece of black that I had cut out for my little die cutting template. So I'm just using some Nuvo Deluxe adhesive, and I'll adhere the two trees together just to give it a little bit of a shadow look, and then I'll adhere that to my card. And once that's done, I'm going to work on the sentiment. I'll pull in a couple of greetings from the stamp set and put it into my Misti, and the greeting says, "Wishing you a very Merry Christmas," and I stamped that a couple of times with Gina K Obsidian amalgam ink, and I'll trim that out, and then I'll get that adhered to my card. And I'm just using the edge of my tonic trimmer to help me get a nice straight cut on my sentiment strip. And I'll put that on my card using some Nuvo Deluxe adhesive again. And then once I had it placed down, I felt like the sentiment was a little bit lost. So I peeled it back up and took a piece of black cardstock and made a small thin mat in behind the sentiment strip just to help it stand up a little bit better. And so I've glued that down to the black cardstock, and then using my tonic trimmer again, I'll just trim out that sentiment and then put it back on my card in the same place that I wanted to before. So again, using my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive, I'll get that glued down to my card, and then I'm happy with that. And I'm going to call this card done. Here is a close-up look at the finished card project. Simple, elegant, cute little card. And moving right along into project number 3. For project number 4, we're going to make a shaker card. So I've got the branch from the Christmas Silhouette stamp set, and I've got some charcoal brown ink and some jelly bean green ink. And I'm just going to use the corner of my ink pad just to ink up the branch itself. And I'll just use my finger to wipe off any excess ink that I get near the top of the branch, and I'll stamp down, and then I'll use the jelly bean green ink and just ink up the tips of the pine sprigs on this image. And then I will bring in another color. This is the Christmas pine, and an ink dauber, and I'll just dab a little bit of ink into the center of this branch just to give it a little bit more dimension, to make it look a little bit richer and fuller. Okay, and I'll stamp down a couple of pine cones, and then I've got 2 of the birds here from the same stamp set, and I'll ink those up with some faded brick ink. And then I'll use my sponge dauber again just to bring in a little bit more of a darker color. This is the red velvet that I just added to the center of the birds. And then I'm going to pull in my Gemini Junior and cut all of these elements out. And then once we've got everything cut out, I'll just push them off to the side of my screen. And you'll notice here that my efforts have failed. And I tried to give a thumbs down, and that failed too because you can't see my thumb because it's pointing down. So I'm going to just grab my mini snips and just trim off the edge. We don't want to waste it. We can still use it and save it. So I'll just trim off the little bit that of extra white there. And then this is still a usable piece. And I'll just shift everything off to the side. And then I'm going to make the shaker. So I've got a piece of pattern paper here from the Sending Love Pure Luxury pattern paper, and I'm using the green gingham. And I've got a scallop die from my stash, and I just cut out a window, and I adhered a piece of acetate to the back of this window, and then added some foam tape all the way around. And then I've picked out a sentiment from the Christmas Silhouette stamp set that says Merry Christmas. And I'm just figuring out my placement to make sure that I'm happy with everything. And I'll put that panel inside of my Misti so I can stamp the greeting and do the same technique with the inks to create a little bit of a variant from dark to light in the red that I'm using, just as we've been doing throughout this video with the sponge dauber. Okay, so I'm happy with that, and I'm going to pull in some of my Nuvo glitter, and this is a chunky glitter, so I've got 3 colors here. I'll have everything listed in the description below. I don't know the names off the top of my head. So I'm just taking my little Tonic Studios little scoop here, and I'm scooping out a little bit of each color of glitter, and I will remove the release paper off the back of my foam tape and get everything adhered together. And then we've got a nice little shaker window, and I'll adhere my images to the front of my card where I want them: the branch, the birds, and the pine cones. And that's about it. Here is a close-up look at the finished card project. This is a cute little shaker card. Got a bunch of sparkle. Okay, moving on to project number 4. Okay, for project number 4, I'm going to use the Folk Art snowflake stamp set, and I've got a bunch of acrylic blocks, and I'm going to load all of the snowflakes up onto my acrylic blocks. And I used one acrylic block twice. I just put this snowflake on the back so I can just flip them around. I'm going to fill up my background with all of these snowflake images. So once everything's all loaded up, I'm going to grab my anti-static powder bag and run that over my cardstock because I'm going to emboss this piece. I'm going to use some Gina Designs embossing and watermark ink, and I will just start stamping these snowflakes in a random pattern all over my card just to fill up the background. And I'll just tilt my cardstock in the light to make sure I didn't miss any of the areas. And then once I'm happy with that, I'm going to use a fine detailed white embossing powder, and I'll sprinkle that over my cardstock and then tap off any of the excess. And then I'll pull in my heat tool and heat the embossing powder until it's smooth and melted. And once that's done, I will pull in a scratch piece of paper, and I'm going to be doing a little bit of ink blending on this panel. So this is the emboss resist technique. So I'm going to put ink all over this panel, and then I'll be able to wipe off the snowflakes that are embossed, and they'll stay nice and bright white. So I've got 2 blender brushes here from Tailored Expressions. I've got my green one and my sort of aqua blue teal brush, and I've got 2 colors of ink. I've got Apple Mint and Ocean Mist, and I'm just going to ink up my blender brush and then tap off the excess so that I get a light transfer. And I just want to lightly go over the center of the snowflakes. I don't want any heavy-handed ink. I just want a very light brush of color. I think these 2 colors together are so lovely. So I'm just going to go over the panel, over the center of each snowflake with my Apple Mint ink and lightly blend it around. And then I'm going to switch to my Sea Glass ink. I may have said Ocean Mist. I can't remember. But this is Sea Glass, not Ocean Mist, just in case that's what I said. And then I'm going to ink up my brush and just fill in the white spots with the Sea Glass ink. Okay, once I'm happy with the blend, I will take my microfiber cloth and just wipe off any of the ink that may be sitting on top of the embossing powder. And then I'm going to take another panel of cardstock, and I'll use my anti-static powder bag, run that over the cardstock, and then stamp down a couple of the snowflakes. I'm going to heat emboss these as well. For these snowflakes, I'm going to use my Recollections Fine Detail Silver Embossing Powder, and I will use my heat gun and heat set those until they're smooth and melted, and then I will run these snowflakes through my Gemini die cutting machine. And then I've got all of these little sentiment strips that I've got stamped out from the incentive stamp set, and I'll link to a video up in the top right hand screen on how I show you how to mass produce these little strips very quickly. I'm just going to choose one of these strips that is heat embossed with the same silver embossing powder. It says Winter Wishes, and I've got a little piece of white fun foam that I'm just going to glue to the back of my panel. It just gives it a nice even raised dimension. I like the way my cards feel with this foam in behind it. I'll get that adhered down to my card base, and then I will glue down the sentiment strip, and I'll use some double-sided tape for that. Once the strip is adhered, I will glue down my snowflakes, and one of my snowflakes I popped up with some foam tape, and I broke a piece of the delicate snowflake off, so I just kind of glued that down to my card base. And then I wasn't really happy with it because it looked funny and the rest of them were popped up. So I went along with my scissors and I just snipped off each of the little snowflakes so that it matched its broken friend. I glued them down to the panel, and then I was happy with the way that looked. And then I went ahead and grabbed some sparkly gems from my stash. This is just a little a little tray of jewels from Bead Landing from Michaels, and they have a variety of sizes inside of them. So I've just gone ahead and chosen a bunch of different size sparkly things to fill up the front of my card. Okay, and that's it for this card. And here's a close-up look at the finished card project. It's nice and sparkly. Okay, moving on to project number 5. Okay, for the last and final project for today, I'm going to pull out my wreath builder. I'm going to use some of the elements in the Winter Hug stamp set to create a wreath for my background for this card. I've loaded up a piece of cardstock in my Misti and chose one of the elements and started stamping in typical wreath fashion. If you've never used the Gina K Designs Wreath Builder before, I'll link a playlist to 3 videos that I have with the Wreath Builder full of tips and tricks for that. So for this wreath, I have used grass green, fresh asparagus, and now cherry red for my 3 images and created a lovely wreath for my background. And then I store my wreath builder templates inside of my Misti, and I just kind of hide that underneath my Misti mouse pad. And then I'm going back to the Winter Hug stamp set and stamping out some snowmen and a little letter from that stamp set. And I'm going to color these in with my alcohol markers. So I've got just a bunch of different alcohol markers, and I'm just going to run through this coloring very, very quickly, and I'll play a little bit of Christmas music and catch you back on the other side. Okay, now that coloring's all done, I'm going to use the coordinating dies and my Gemini to cut these out. And then we'll get ready to assemble this card. I'll just pop these guys out very carefully, and then I'm going to grab a piece of the grass green cardstock that came in the kit, and I'm just going to give this a nice little green mat in behind. I think it'll tie everything together nicely. And I'm using that Gina K Designs adhesive dot runner. And grab my tonic trimmer just to trim that panel down, and then I'm just going to figure out my placement with my words, kind of wiggling it around there till I'm happy with it. And then since we've come this far, I want to use my Misti to stamp that greeting because I don't want to mess it up at this point. So I'm going to use that obsidian black ink again and stamp my holiday wishes greeting down, and I'm happy with that. And then we'll go move on to adhering everything to the card base. I'm going to tie some black sheer ribbon to tie in the obsidian black ink to tie a beautiful little bow off to the side here. And then we'll use some Nuvo Deluxe adhesive and get everything glued down to my card base. And then I'm going to pop these little snowman up in the center of my wreath along with his little letter that I'm going to tuck kind of in his hand and underneath his scarf. And then we're going to call this card done. So that's it for these 5 projects. Here is a close-up look at this finished card. And here's a look once more at all 5 card projects that we've made today. I really tried to create something unique and different, and hopefully I've given you some inspiration for your Gina K Designs Warm Winter Wishes card kit. I had so much fun making these cards, and I have plenty more to go, so hopefully I'll be able to find some time to record and edit as many as I can Christmas card videos and inspiration using Gina K Designs supplies that I have tons of. So once again, I truly appreciate all of your support. If you've made it this far to the end of the video, thank you so much for stopping by to spend a half an hour of your time with me here today. I truly appreciate all of the support, the likes, the thumbs ups, the subscribes. It really truly means a lot to me. I enjoy making these YouTube videos, and I hope that there'll be lots more to come. So don't forget to check out the description box below to find links to the products that I've used. I'll do my best to provide as many that I can, and as per usual, my links are not affiliate. I don't benefit monetarily from anything that I've shared with you here today or my links. I have not been asked to showcase any of the products here today. I have purchased everything with my own money and share tutorials and inspiration with you because I enjoy it. So again, thanks so much for stopping by, and have a wonderful day.